Good evening to all of you. Welcome to the MMA Webinar Series 2020 as we continue to bring to you curated and rich insights in collaboration with industry experts, marketers, and partners. I'm Monica Khurana, MMA India Country Head, and your host for today. Today's session is hugely valuable given the digital first world we're all living in. The topic being capitalizing on consumer intelligence to drive marketing performance. This, we believe, is a sure short way to enable success for a marketer, and it is a sure short way for revenue generation. Given the cohorts that can be created with intelligent platforms, which in turn can provide accurate predictions on behavior, purchase patterns, and hence increase the impact of marketing programs specific to acquisition and retention. The session is being led from the best in class customer intelligence platform, where the techniques have been successfully tried and tested over and over again. However, before we get started, let me share a little bit about MMA with you. MMA is one of the only trade bodies which enables participation from the entire ecosystem, thereby engaging advertisers, marketers, tech enablers, publishers, and several other domain experts into the fold. In India, we represent the ecosystem just the way we represent it globally. And that is a snapshot of our members in India. Having said that, MMA essentially enables the chief marketers and ensures that it is playing a key role in transformation and innovation through modern marketing techniques and driving growth with closer and stronger consumer engagement. The same being enabled through various formats such as enabling inspirations, enabling thought leadership, enabling networking opportunities, and enabling a whole lot of training and educational initiatives. We also have several think tanks and groups which work across initiatives to enable across media perspective, to enable attribution perspective, and enable views on organizational restructuring, thereby making sure that we are able to bring best in class tools to the industry to be able to deliver superlative performance as marketers. The programs that we are running are led by our members, by our board, and by the working groups. We also have several councils which we actively run in India and are open for participation to our members and are also mentored by our board. With that, it brings us to the webinar today. And before I introduce you to our speaker for the day, I do want to share some housekeeping rules with you. As you know, there is a questions feature in the dashboard from where you are viewing the webinar. Feel free to ask your question. However, please specify your name, your designation, and your company name so that the answer can be contextualized for you to take away valuable learnings from the same. Also, please restrict your questions only to the topic being discussed today. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our speaker for the session today, who's Anindya Datta, the CEO and founder of Mobilewalla. Mobilewalla is a leading consumer intelligence company that provides data and intelligence to drive better AI. On the personal front, he's a movie buff, a book lover, and loves playing golf. One of his favorite recommendations is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Mobilewalla operates globally with particularly strong footprints in Southeast Asia, India, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, and works closely with leading telcos, FMCG companies, and e-business providers. Welcome, Anindya, to the session, and thank you for making time for it. I know it's a very early start for you today, and it means a lot for you to be here for this session.
Thanks.
So welcome, and let me turn it to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Monica and the MMA team. So you see my screen, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So thanks to the MMA team. I also appreciate the time and presence of our audience. To everyone, welcome to this discussion. And I also wanted to alert you that during this presentation, we'll be doing a small number of audience polls. So what will happen is that during the presentation, I'll sort of hand it over to Monica to describe and conduct the polls, and then she'll turn it back to me again once the polls are done. So welcome again. As Monica already mentioned, this discussion is about the using of consumer intelligence to drive enhanced marketing, right? So we wanted to start off with the poll itself. So Monica, if you, I'll hand it over to you to do the first quick poll.
Sure. So I'm just going to launch it. And the first poll for the session is, what challenges do you face in your role? The choices being lack of deep understanding of consumer and prospect behavior and patterns, can't reach ideal buyers or target audience segments, you need more data to improve AI ML models, or you're unable to attribute ROI to ad campaigns. Which of these do you think is relevant to you for your business? And we do see some answers coming in, Anindya. I'm going to close it in a couple of seconds and turn the results to you for your comments.
Okay.
And I think we do have a healthy number of votes on each. And here we go to the results, and the results are in front of you. Your comments.
Yeah, Monica, am I muted or can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So interesting. So actually, by the three of the choices, two of the choices are almost equal, which is lack of deep understanding of consumer prospect behavior and patterns, and attribution of ad campaigns, right? So both of them, one is 36%, one is 29%. The other two are definitely lower. So people the issue of targeting and reaching ideal buyers is a problem for the smallest number of the audience, and needing more data to improve modeling is the second lowest, right? So it's and again, before commenting on this, so let's get through a few slides of the presentation, and then perhaps we can contextualize these results, right? So again, the discussion is about using consumer intelligence. And as all of us know, intelligence is really a byproduct of data. So I doubt really anyone in the audience will argue against use data in marketing. So marketers have used data since the dawn of sort of formal marketing in organizations roughly 70 years ago. So data has always been available, right? From traditional assets like surveys and the census to modern digital data artifacts like cookies and apps, the value of data in marketing is universally recognized, right? Regardless, the narrative and emphasis around data and intelligence have shown a marked increase in the recent past. And this trend is driven by a few key sort of industry subtrends. So let's look at them. So first is the increased nuance and complexity around how consumers interact with brands. Second is the amount of data, basically the data exhaust that is generated along each step of the marketing journey. And finally, a key trend in data-driven marketing is the rapid rise of a variety of technologies that make it possible to sort of collect, store, and manipulate the information that is generated, right? So let's briefly consider each of these trends in turn. So first, the issue of customer journey complexity, right? So how customers interact with brands has really undergone a sea change in the past couple of decades, right? Even 15 years ago, there were primarily 2 touch points through which customers touched brands. Now there are in some cases up to 10 touch points. So the average customer goes through 6 touch points in interacting with brands. and you know, this translates to thousands of possible paths to purchase or paths to conversion. Right? So the overall customer journey complexity has significantly increased. Not only do each of these paths generate large amounts of sort of trace data, right, as the customer moves to the paths, the nature of this data depends upon the channel of connection, right? For instance, the data generated when a user connects with a brand's e-catalog is different than when the user uses the desktop web, right? And even more different than when she connects to the brand through an app. So different paths generate different types of data, which are essential to sort of understand, to be able to understand how the consumer is moving through. And finally, we come to the third trend driving the use of data in marketing. So technologies that allow marketers to harness the consumer data we just spoke about. So on this slide, we are showing you the latest version of the well-known MarTech technology landscape, right? And this landscape is effectively subdivided into a bunch of different tech subclasses, and data technologies is one of the 6 subspaces identified. So if one were to go back to the various versions of this particular landscape, since its first release in 2011, the growth of the data subspace is remarkable. So let me show you. So it turns out that data technologies have been the fastest growing MarTech subspace thus far, whether you take sort of short-term growth, so from 2019 to 2020, where the overall MarTech subspace grew by, overall MarTech space grew by almost 14%, data grew by 26%. Or if you consider overall, right, turns out that in the 9 years that this diagram has been, that this particular artifact has been published, the data technology segment has grown by 55 times, right, 5,500%. So in summary, therefore, the value of data and intelligence for marketers simply cannot be overstated. Right? So let's now turn our attention. To the types of data available to marketers. Right. So marketing data is typically classified into 3 buckets. Right? So first-party data is the data your organization sort of natively possesses, right? Such as purchase data for a retailer, the customer ride data for a rideshare company, or data generated via marketing survey. I mean, clearly, this data is the backbone of your data strategy. Second-party data is the data acquired from another brand, right? So effectively, the first-party data from another company. And finally, third-party data refers to the data acquired from general purpose data vendors, such as the consumer data that enriches a company's first-party data, right? So briefly, let's now consider the usefulness of each data class. So clearly, first-party data is the most trusted and high-quality data source you can possibly have, given that you collect it and can verify its truthfulness or provenance, right? The issue with first-party data is usually scale across both breadth and depth. A company only has data on its customers, on its own customers, not on consumers at large. And you only know the data attributes these customers share with you, right? A retailer, for instance, will have declared personal information of its loyalty card holders, but will not typically know which other retailers these people go to. So second-party data is the first-party data for another organization, so will be presumed to be high quality as well. Though verifiability is a challenge, right? But you cannot verify it yourself. And like your own first-party data, since second-party data is effectively the first-party data of another company, it is also scale challenged, right? And most importantly, though, organizations are generally unwilling to share their valuable first-party data. So second-party data is sort of hard to come by, right? And finally, third-party data offers scale, right, across both depth and breadth, in comparison to first-party data, With modern data-driven applications, particularly predictive modeling driven by machine learning, data breadth is sort of super important. Which first-party data lacks and third-party data can usually fill in. So while the value of third-party data is undisputed, the issue often brought up sort of in its context is quality, right? With so many providers, it is difficult to know who provides good data. And data buyers in companies typically have to go through a quality assessment sort of step before purchasing data from a third-party source. So let's go to the next slide. Yes. So marketers increasingly use all three asset types. And this slide reports the results of a relatively recent survey conducted by eMarketer that sought to understand the perceived value of these assets. So unsurprisingly, nearly half of the respondents chose first-party data as the most effective. But equally interestingly, nearly 42% identified third-party data as the next most effective, right? Way more than the third of respondents that said, hey, second-party data is the most important, right? The reason, again, as we mentioned, for third-party data comes from its breadth. While first-party data, your own data is clearly invaluable, it is restricted to a firm's limited observational purview, right? I mean, you only get to see your customers when they interact with you, not outside. And with modern data-driven applications, particularly predictive modeling driven by machine learning, data breadth assumes high importance, right? Observing people not just in limited context, but in broad contexts. And third-party data can fill that in, right? So at this time, we'll conduct our second poll. So Monica, I'll just briefly transfer it over to you.
Sure, works. So I'm going to launch the poll for the audience, and it's a very interesting question where we're trying to understand from those listening in, how effectively are you using third-party data in your marketing today? The choices being we use only first-party data, we're in the early stages of exploring additional data options, we're using some third-party data in our marketing initiatives, or we're effectively using third-party data to improve our marketing results. And we are seeing some skews here for sure. And I'm going to turn it to you in just a few more seconds with the results. And in India, this definitely may be a little predictable on where this goes, but over to you, and here are the results.
So this clearly mirrors the marketer survey, right? So, but what's interesting. So this poll is super interesting, right? I mean, and what I'll point out is the very encouraging thing, at least for me personally, and for companies like us that are trying to drive the increased use of data, is that over half, nearly 60% of the respondents say that we are using some third-party data in our marketing initiatives, right? So that's great. In fact, 2 years ago, when sort of use of data was much more nascent, this was much less. But what's an interesting contradiction is that only 6% of the audience said that we are exploring additional data options. And 56% said that we are already using. So there is at least to me there is some contradiction in that. Perhaps it is that the people that said we are using it did not also respond. So maybe basically what we are saying that about 62% of the audience are either using it or considering using third party, which is also sort of super encouraging, right? So having discussed the role of data. So basically, I spent the discussion so far focused on, hey, data usage is important. This is why data usage is important, and this is sort of different types of data, and this is how the market says they're using data. So having discussed broadly the role of data, So I'm going to now move to considering a few ways in which marketers are leveraging data and intelligence to enhance effectiveness of their operations, right? So specifically, I'll talk of 3 examples of intelligence-driven marketing. We'll talk of sort of the notions of, and I'm going to use industry terms. We're going to talk of data enrichment, predictive modeling, and audience segmentation, right? So that's the rest of the presentation. We'll consider each of these in turn. So first is data enrichment. Perhaps the most canonical and the most generic use of data, right? So the need to enrich enterprise data, as I already alluded to earlier, is driven by the limited visibility of first-party data, right? So enterprises typically only see consumers when they interact with channels that are company owned and operated, right? Such that when somebody comes to your physical store or digitally visits your website or uses your app, right? But building, this is of course super important and reveals critical intelligence. But building meaningful and actionable consumer intelligence requires visibility into far more than this limited information, right? Simply put, the consumer's behaviors outside of company-owned channels are essential to understanding her, right? So this is achieved by enriching your first-party data, typically with third-party data, right? So what are some of these gaps? So basically the point I'm making is that while first-party data provides incredibly important observational intelligence, there are significant gaps that enrichment can fill in. So what are some of these gaps, right? So in this slide, I'll describe sort of 3 scenarios that demonstrate or exemplify these gaps, right? So the first is where you consider a consumer who walks into a physical store, browses, and then leaves, right? Doesn't buy anything. And effectively what happens is that no trace of this interaction remains on the company's records as the consumer didn't purchase anything, right? Yet if the same customer, if the same user buys a product subsequently through the company's website, valuable information about his path to purchase is lost, right? So you basically, the fact that, that the buy had a preceding sort of browse, physical browse, which is very important, is lost. As a second example, imagine a consumer calling in or walking in to a telco, a mobile service provider, right? And after this, assume the consumer signs up for a postpaid subscription plan, right? For himself, his spouse, and his 2 children, right? In order to sign up, the provider, of course, requires the consumer, the account holder, to provide data about himself. And this data adds to the valuable first-party data of the telecom provider. However, the provider gets no data about the 3 other users of the service, right? The spouse and the 2 children. A gap which significantly impacts the telco's ability to understand who their users are, right? In fact, bulk of the usage is likely going to happen not from the account holder, but other people in his household. And also what the pattern of their usage is, right? So this, by the way, is a very, very well-known problem and referred to as the head of household problem in the telecom industry, right? And finally, consider a scenario in an insurance company context, right? So let's say a consumer accesses the website of a large, automobile or a travel insurance provider, interacts closely with the site, creates a customized plan, and then leaves. So this is a very common occurrence at many websites, and one where the site owner would like to retarget this visitor, right? Because the visitor exhibited strong buying intent. Unfortunately, at the insurance company's website, because the visitor was not already a customer and therefore didn't log in, no addressable identity was captured that can enable retargeting, right? Yes, anonymous traces remain in the company's web logs, but they're not useful in identifying the visitor, right? So in closing, while first-party data is sort of invaluable, it does leave significant gaps that, if not filled, will not lead to effective and actionable consumer intelligence that marketers need, right? So hopefully, sort of this makes sense. So within this context, so having said this, the benefits of enrichment are sort of easy to articulate, right? It allows you to build comprehensive portraits of the consumer that are critical for your business, for those you already know, such as your customers. Enrichment can add valuable intelligence that is not visible to you directly, such as connecting sort of, the atomic interaction traces to understand paths to purchase, like hey, this person browsed in a physical store and then bought online. But equally importantly, enrichment can reveal those consumers that you are not even aware of, right? And are not your current customers, and enable you to create strategies to prospect them. Another upcoming use of data enrichment is to drive powerful predictive modeling. So we will talk about this separately in this presentation. So to end this enrichment section, we now present a case study from one of our clients. So the client is a large sort of multi-channel apparel retailer, right? So the clothing store, spending over about $40 million annually on digital advertising. A significant segment of their budget is spent on driving both in-store, this is a multi-channel retailer, and a significant segment of their budget is spent on driving both in-store and online interaction. But the company did not have visibility into how effective their spend was in driving this interaction, and also wished to understand the longitudinal impacts of their spend, right? I mean, they did have limited attribution, but the attribution was limited to, hey, somebody saw an ad, on day X, and did they do anything directly within the next 15 or 21 days, right? So over time, they didn't have any insights, right? So specifically, their first-party data was missing answer to the following questions. So who was receiving the millions, the tens of millions of impressions they were buying and serving, right? And by who was receiving, I mean both their identities, meaning sort of who they were, and their portraits, right? The campaign reports from the agency were generic and not actionably granular. Secondly, they were also missing, the long-term behavior of the recipient. This was not visible to them. The attribution partners provided short-term results and were not able to connect offline and online, right? For instance, if a purchase occurred a month after the interaction, this would never be captured. So we enrich their data with a uniform identity scheme and detailed portraits of each consumer that the company touched, right? Either via an ad impression or an online or offline visit. As a result, the company is no longer captive to sort of short-term myopic visibility. And by understanding long-term interaction dynamics with their consumers, the retailer designed advertising strategies that drove substantive improvements in both online and offline interaction, and have improved ROI of digital spend by over 250%. So we'll conduct our third poll at this time. So Monica, over to you briefly.
Sure, coming up. Yeah. So the third poll is about, in your opinion, what is the most important factor in acquiring data from a third party? Is it coverage and scale? Is it methodology and data collection? Is it privacy and consent policy? Or is it pricing? So those are the choices for our audience. And there's quite a mix of responses flowing in. We'll just give it a couple of more seconds. And I think we do have a perspective here. I'm going to turn it to you with the results. There you go.
So very interesting. So coverage and scale. So again, it shows sort of maturity of using data. A couple of years ago, pricing used to be much higher in the ranking. but pricing is the lowest, meaning, people are sort of willing to buying data is getting sort of a part of people's budgets. And coverage and scale are turns out to be the most important, which makes sense, right? Because effectively you want the best data that is available. All right. So now let's turn, having talked about enrichment, let's turn our attention to the second area where consumer intelligence enhances marketing effectiveness, and personally, sort of an area of great interest to me, predictive modeling and the use of AI and machine learning in marketing. Right? So the rapid rise of AI and machine learning in marketing is a direct consequence of the availability of intelligence that has driven a shift from deterministic to predictive analytics in marketing. Right? So traditionally, marketers have performed deterministic analysis. So you guys all know this. And deterministic analysis uses sort of historical data and outputs aggregated metrics that represent sort of core business patterns of interest and these historical patterns, and then used to plan future business, right? So in contrast, sort of predictive analytics sort of uses AI and instead of using historical data to plan the future, AI and predictive analytics uses machine learning techniques to predict future events. Right? So deterministic analysis looks at history. So in a telecommunication service provider, for instance, such an analysis could reveal that customers who have churned in the past 3 months and compare their average monthly spend to those who have remained subscribers. Right? In contrast, predictive analytics looks directly into the future, right? Not use past patterns to plan future, but actually predict the future itself. So in the context of this example, based on identified patterns, it seeks to predict directly who's likely to churn in the next 3 to 6 months, and not just that, but quantify sort of each customer's likelihood to churn. So in the past, a vast majority of marketing actions have been driven by deterministic analysis. But there is, however, a growing belief that predictive analytics must inform marketing actions of the future, right? So the backbone of predictive modeling are techniques rooted in AI and machine learning, areas that have become pervasive in the current world, right? So the audience, I won't spend too much on advertising AI and machine learning. You all know this. The audience of this is well aware of how AI permeates our daily lives, right? From face recognition to self-driving automobiles. I mean, in a sense, every time you're using your finger to log into your iPhone, that's using AI, right? A particularly fruitful application of AI. AI impacts a lot of different areas, but a particularly fruitful application of AI is in marketing to predict consumer behavior and design strategies that drive the outcomes that you seek to drive. Right? So we now provide 3 examples of how predictive modeling is used in marketing scenarios. Right? So by the way, I don't mean to imply these are all possible use cases, but these are large, the use of AI and machine learning in marketing is still relatively early, and these are some of the use cases that are finding repeated applications, right? So the first is predicting customer churn to drive retention actions, right? And is widely used in virtually every consumer business with a subscription model, right? That includes telecom companies, that includes, food delivery companies, that includes rideshare companies where people sign up and sort of repeatedly spend. Another widely used modeling exercise, or another widely used use case that AI ML serves in marketing, is propensity modeling, right? So propensity modeling outputs propensities, or the likelihood that a consumer will find your product or service attractive, right? Such propensities increasingly drive acquisition strategies. Instead of basically you sell a particular product, if you knew that a person or that a particular consumer was not inclined to like your product, why waste dollars by offering the product to that person, right? You'd rather offer the product to people who are predisposed to being affined to it. Right? And finally, we draw your attention to lifetime value or LTV modeling, which is very widely applied now in many cases, which predicts the monetary value of a customer to your business, impacting a variety of customer touch strategies from acquisition, retention to cross and upsell, right? So LTV prediction allows you to spend your marketing dollars going after those prospects who are likely to be of value to you while avoiding those that won't, right? So basically it's a combination of propensity and LTV modeling that underpins the acquisition, retention, and LTV growing strategies of sort of smart marketers. So interestingly, so you can see that on the right of this slide, so I have this thing called householding, which is kind of highlighted. So interestingly, across a variety of modeling scenarios, including those that I described, a common consumer attribute that is deeply impactful is the household of the consumer. Right? So basically understanding a consumer's household is useful in all these, in churn, in propensity, in LTV, various other contexts, right? So why is that? Because it turns out that the household to which a consumer belongs is predictive of a host of his behavior, right? From the shampoo or the smartphone handset he uses to how likely he is to switch from one telco carrier to another. And as we already discussed before, while enterprises often have data of the account holder, they know little to nothing about the members of our household who are key users of its product or service, right? As a result, enterprises are increasingly looking to acquire household data about their customers and prospects to complete the picture, right? So now a few words about building predictive models. So predictive models are, we won't spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to touch upon this. So predictive models are built by AI and machine learning techniques, trained on historical data. So these algorithms or techniques seek to find patterns in this data that are highly correlated with the outcome being modeled, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. So, hey, what are patterns that predict the outcome I seek or are correlated with the outcome I seek? And the model that is produced sort of codifies the detection of these patterns in data going forward, right? So clearly the two key components in producing these models are the techniques used and the data that are trained on, right? So the two sort of key aspects. So a general rule is that for marketing applications in particular, and most enterprise AI use cases in general, the quality of the training data impacts model quality much more than the algorithm used, right? I mean, this is particularly useful for marketers to understand because most times that you will speak to your own data science team, your colleagues who are data scientists or external AI tool vendors, what you are sold is how a sophisticated algorithm should build powerful predictions that will impact your business goals. Oh yeah, hey, let's use deep learning to predict churn or something, right? So you should know that this is in general quite inaccurate, right? A simple algorithm with good training data will almost always beat a sophisticated algorithm with inadequate data, right? So to build meaningful models, basically to build, to ensure the proper use of predictive modeling, you must first ensure that you have good data with scale across both breadth and depth. Is much more important than using whiz bang techniques. Right? So again, we'll end this section with a case study. So the use case is basically high value consumer identification and modeling. Right? So it turns out that in most direct to consumer companies, the distribution of revenue is not uniform across the customer base. Right? Rather, it tends to be highly skewed. Right? A relatively small percentage of customers contribute an outsized fraction of revenue. clearly, when these businesses, and all of you, I won't even give you examples of direct to consumer business, you know, retailers, you know, rideshare companies, telcos, I mean, you name it. I mean, clearly, when these businesses acquire customers, they would rather acquire customers who will become high value rather than those who will not spend much. And let me assure you, this queue is quite heavy, right? So like 12% of your customers generate 70% of your revenue, things like that. So we work with one of the largest home food delivery companies in the world on high value customer prediction. Right? Traditionally, only 12% of this company's customer base was high value, accounting for nearly 65% of the revenue. And they were already, when they started talking to us, they were already performing, you know, high value modeling to both drive acquisition as well as making sure existing high value customers didn't churn, right? So after our engagement, but they were doing high value modeling based on their own first party data. So after our engagement, which included significantly enriching their data set with features that they were natively not privy to, the fraction of high value customers now stand at 14%, right? So it's gone up from 12 to 14%. While an uptick, you know, from 12 to 14 might not sound impressive at first glance, you know, do note that this represents a 17% increase in sort of high value customers in aggregate, resulting in significantly increased GMV, gross market value, per customer, as well as substantively higher ROI on acquisition spend. And just as an anecdote, you might be interested in learning that, you know, one sort of the enriched data, they enriched the data and ran modeling, the most predictive feature, right? The feature that predicted the most strongly how much a person was likely to spend with this food delivery company, and we have done this in multiple countries and this plays out everywhere, is home to work commute distance, right? So larger the commute distance, the more likely the consumer is the more likely the consumer is to be high value, right? And this is something that this company natively didn't have, right? They had their home address, but they didn't know how much they were driving to work. So now we will end this session by discussing the third way in which data and intelligence impacts marketing, and that is audience segmentation, right? So audience segmentation refers to classifying consumers into buckets, where each bucket represents sort of a well-defined interest class, right? So consumers who are similar in some way. So one of the key reasons to segment consumers is to drive effective advertising, right? To reach a group of folks with an identical message that asks them to act a certain way, right? The idea is that the same message is not appropriate for the consumer base at large. If you can segment the consumer base into smaller sort of identical classes, then you can, you know, and the same message across those smaller classes are more likely to be useful than the same message across the entire consumer class, right? Clearly, with this message, brands prefer to reach users who are more likely to act than those who are not, right? So I will present to you in this context a case study that I already presented earlier, but in a slightly different context, right? So earlier we spoke about how data enrichment helps this large retailer to have better on digital spend. Here, I will draw your attention to the underlying root cause of this increase, right? So by observing how consumers reacted to advertising. Basically, by seeing how consumers reacted to advertising, we were able to group them into specific buckets, right? For instance, 45 to 54-year-old males who are fitness inclined, right? And we found that these buckets tended to react to ads in different ways, right? For instance, this 45 to 54-year-old male bucket who are fitness inclined, this was the bucket, we found that are more likely than others to visit a physical store before they complete an online purchase, right? Whereas other buckets were more inclined to complete the purchase without visiting a physical store, right? So this allowed, you know, these simple propensity rules allowed the retailer to generate touch strategies for these different segments that were in line, that were aligned with the propensities that we saw. For instance, for the 45 to 54-year-old male segment, the retailer encouraged them first to visit a store before urging online interaction, right? And the idea was, hey, if you just simply ask them to interact online, they often didn't buy. So by encouraging them to first visit a store, and then once they saw that they'd visited the store, then online engagement, conversion increased greatly. Right? So such granular strategies for various segments allowed sort of enhanced business outcomes to occur. Right? So I wanted to end this session. I mean, this discussion was quite generic. I wanted to end this session by giving you a quick overview of who we are. Right? So who are you listening to? So what's the background of the messages that we are delivering? So I work for Mobilewalla, and we are a consumer data and intelligence company that provides enterprises with data and intelligence artifacts. And the goal is to help you understand your consumers better and build powerful predictive models that drive enhanced business outcomes. Right? So our clients are primarily business to consumer companies. Though those sort of large business to business enterprises also acquire our data as a raw material for building their products. And sort of the core reason why we exist is encapsulated sort of in the enrichment and in the predictive modeling message, right? So your own data, which is the core message that companies like Mobilewalla provide to their customers and prospects, is that your own data is extraordinarily valuable, but it is missing a lot of visibility because you basically see your customers in your own walled gardens, right? And if you really want to grow, and if you really want to scale, and that visibility is not enough, right? You cannot design powerful strategies to acquire, retain, and grow by just observing people in a narrow context. And we both provide you intelligence about your own customers outside of your walled garden, and we help you generate knowledge that allows you to go and get additional customers from the people who are not already in your customer base, right? So with that, I'm glad that I have followed instructions to end with 10 minutes left for questions. So we end the presentations. Thank you for listening. So Monica, over to you for final thoughts.
Sure thing. And I think that was extremely useful. And this is a subject where the expertise is really needed. The understanding is really needed. So I think at a concept level, it did a lot of justice to all those who are listening in. And I do see several questions here, and I'm glad we do have some time to address them. So I'm going to take up a few of them. And if we run out of time, we will take the rest offline through email for those who have asked us these questions. So let me start off by asking you a question which has come in from Ruchita Jain, who works with a life insurance company, and it's called Max Life Insurance. Her question is, how can we use the solutions in a life insurance category? So any thoughts there?
Sure. So we work with a number of large insurance companies, so there is not enough time to really do justice to this question. But let me briefly give you. So one way is when you receive life insurance applications. One of the key elements of evaluating those applications is to evaluate risk, right? So one of the ways in which third-party data, one of the ways that Mobilewalla is generically used, and in general, third-party data can be used in most insurance contexts, is to improve your risk models, right? So when a consumer applies for life insurance, the consumer's lifestyle, the consumer's behavior, the users, become critical to understanding sort of how risky is this person's to insure, And that's something that we are very good at helping do. More tactically, things like many life insurance companies in particular, insurance companies in general, have large digital presences, right? Where one of the ways you look to acquire customers is through these digital channels. And data like this can greatly help both widen and increase conversion through digital funnels in a number of different ways.
Interesting. I hope that helps get some perspective. The next question I'm moving to is about an interesting one again. Given the short lifespan of cookies and ad IDs, how have you managed to track repeat visits from the same person? This comes from Navneel Roy from Moving Walls.
So we have so the core of what we do is assign sort of persistent longitudinal IDs to consumers, right? So yes, I mean, ad IDs are very short-lived. Cookies effectively have become useless, right? So what we do is, once we observe a consumer, we try to identify the consumer and propagate the same ID through. So, for instance, we generally associate a location where the consumer lives. We try to associate emails with the consumer. We try to associate repeated IP addresses with the consumer, right? So we attach different sort of observable atomic sort of ID signals and create an overall ID signal for a consumer, which persists over time. But it's a great question. So one of our core IP, if you will, some of the core underlying science that we do is sort of powerful assignment of persistent IDs to consumers.
Got it.
So, for instance,
I think here's another. Sorry.
Just to so an example is just, for instance, if we see a consumer with a different ID coming from the same IP address, 3 evenings in a row, we say that is likely to be the same consumer than 2 different consumers, and so on, right? Go ahead, Monica.
No, sounds logical and makes sense. I think that would help get the clarity they were looking for. Let me move to the next question. Again, I think even if it's coming from a specific person, it will be useful to the larger audience as well. Wherein the question is, how do privacy and consent play a role in using third-party data?
Yeah, this is super, perhaps the most important question of all, right? Especially given how tough privacy regimes are turning into. So all data providers, not just us, anybody who's doing anything with consumer data is subject to this, right? So I'll answer the question in 2 different ways. So as a buyer of data, you need to ensure that the data that is coming to you has the right consents and the right privileges attached to it, right? So, for instance, a company X sells you, locations that somebody's is been seen at, right? So you need to ensure that, hey, does this person A have the right to get this data, and B, do I have the right to use this data again? So the second way is, what we do is that we are hyper careful. We are extremely conservative in building assets and building intelligence assets that are composed of both data that has consent in it from a collection perspective. So we only buy from people who can prove to us that they have consent to get that data, because we don't touch consumers directly, right? So we just buy our data. And second, we also ensure that they have the right for secondary uses of the data. So yes, you have the right to collect that data, and you also have the consent for this data to be used in derived artifacts like the way. So it's a discussion in itself, but now there are it's becoming a little easier because regimes like GDPR, regimes like CCPA, regimes like the Japanese privacy regime are codifying rules that you can specifically verify to see the data satisfies those rules, and that allows you to sort of purchase or not purchase.
Makes perfect sense, and it's as legitimate as it can get in which scenario. So I think that must be extremely helpful to all those listening in, because it's very important that the process is legitimate. When one is enabling such targeting. This is another very interesting one, and again very contextual to the times we are in currently. How will the pandemic and the long lockdown impact the first party data according to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So this is something we face, like, to be absolutely honest with you, this is sort of really good for companies like us in a sense, right? So the big problem that marketers are facing now is that a lot of the insights that you typically generated and that let you act on are no longer there. For instance, for a lot of marketers, a consumer's behavior outside their home is really, really important, right? Hey, are you a fitness lover? Do you go to Starbucks, right? Simple things that you can buy. So those insights have become very hard to come by, right? Because nobody goes outside their home. So in a sense, consumer behavior or observation of consumer behavior, which underpins marketing strategy, right, has become really restricted and really constrained because consumer behavior itself has become so constrained. So you can imagine for the last 9 months, the breadth of data has effectively vanished, right? So in this case, and this really impacts your strategies, right? So in this case, companies like Mobilewalla, so what we go and say is that, look, so we can do two things.
Oops. Anindya, have we lost you? Anindya? Uh, I think we may have to take the rest of the questions offline. It seems Anindya is having a bad connection. So probably we'll have to come back to, we were about to wind down, and I think he's managed to address some of the questions that we got in the session. We will get back on the questions which we were unable to take as of now. Having said that, I do want to thank Anindya for his time and sharing his expertise. I think the objective today was to touch upon aspects like data enrichment to create a 360-degree view of the customer, to improve predictive modeling, and ways to reach the right audience, which we've kind of covered through the session and through all the case studies he put out there. So a big thank you to Anindya for helping us demystify the space of consumer intelligence and drive marketing performance.
Monica?
It is extreme.
Monica,
Hi, Laurie.
hey, it's Laurie Hood. Anindya's going to log back in. His connection just dropped. I know there's only a little bit of time left, but maybe he can pick up another question.
Yeah, we have a minute or two. If he's back, we can take it. However, I just wanted to let the audience know that we will be sharing a recording of today's presentation with everybody so they can revisit, review everything that was spoken. and discussed, as well as the answers to the questions which came into the Q&A section. And maybe we can try and give Anindya a minute to get back if he is able to, or we will close the webinar.
Hey, sorry, Monica. For whatever reason, I
Perfect.
lost it. I'm back again, but sorry for the
No worries, no worries, no worries. I think technology, we are all at the mercy of technology. We understand. So do you want to complete the point you were making?
Remind me the question that I was answering at the end.
You were talking about how is the pandemic impacting first party data?
So I was saying that two things. One is, the big issue is physical behavior tracing is basically not there, and that's super important for marketers. So typically we can do two things, right? One is we can substitute digital behavior and say that that's a proxy for physical behavior. And the second is we can go look at history. I think this is where I got cut off. Yes, I don't see a person going to gym now, but if I saw the same person going to gym until March of last year, then you can say that, hey, that behavior will likely continue when the pandemic goes away, right? And that's a hard thing because keeping history is not so easy because the amount of data is so large, and we have massive amount of history to supplant that. So those are the, and I think we are at the end of time. So I don't want to go too long.
No worries. So I have mentioned to all those who are listening in that we will address the pending questions over email and get back to them offline most definitely. So Anindya, whilst you were trying to log in, we were just thanking you for spending time doing this session. I think the inputs were extremely valuable, and the objective was to enable perspective on data enrichment, predictive modeling, reaching right audiences as the three very key buckets, which I think we managed in the given time pretty effectively. We were able to do Q&A as well. So thank you very much for sharing those learnings and those wonderful case studies. It's definitely very useful in today's context and is absolutely integral in everybody's marketing strategy in the new normal world. So the recording for all those listening in will be shared, and even all those who missed the session will be able to take a look at it since they had registered for this particular topic. Having said that, we would like to bring the webinar to a close and remind our audience on the upcoming webinar scheduled for the month of November, which continues our pursuit in enabling modern marketing expertise and learnings, and bring to you topics and subjects which are highly curated and expertise which is highly essential in today's context. I also do want to remind you on various ways in which you can remain connected with MMA. Feel free to subscribe to our monthly newsletters, which will always update you on all our initiatives and all our programs which we are running on very actively month on month. We also do have all our updates on our social media channels. So kindly follow our channels, like the page, so you don't miss out on any important sessions and conversations that are scheduled. So as we bring the webinar to a close, thank you once again to Anindya and Mobilewalla. Do stay tuned with us for more as we bring to you various ways to shape the future of modern marketing. And thank you. Have a lovely evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.